Hello, Joe.
Hey,
All right, that's working now.
good. Okay, let me just get this loaded up. Okay, so let's talk about validation. Let me share the right screen with you. Can you read that okay?
Yeah, I could read that.
Okay.
Let me make it a little bigger, though. Yeah, that's looking good. Hello, Joe. Hey. Oh, that's weird. All right, that's working now.
Ah, you have it. Do you have the stream open in a different window?
Yeah, let me
Just load it up. Okay. So let's talk about validation. Let me share the right screen with you.
Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. Let me make sure I got this right. Yeah. Okay, you can still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, validation then. I have this set up. This is just an example app. It's 03 reactivity from the Shiny examples. And I have it set up to run inside of my RStudio, so you can read that too?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Okay, cool. So validation. Uh, let's take a look at this. Let's start with this example. We've got choose a data set here, right? And I've got these three options. And I added a blank option so you don't have to choose one. And here you get some weird result for data summary, right, if you haven't chosen anything.
Okay.
So the way this used to work is, so that's output summary in this case. Okay. You used to have to do, okay, if there's no data set, then you would return nothing, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that didn't do the right thing. Okay, it turns out that in this particular case, it's not null, it's also a zero-length string. What? Oh yeah, this is actually returning null. Oh, so actually maybe there's the data set is required. Well, this is embarrassing. What am I doing wrong here? Input data set. There we go. See that?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, it's red. It's got a bold error in front of it, so that's not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing is that, okay, so in this particular case, we had to say stop. But you might say return instead, okay? So, okay, in this case, that's kind of unfortunate. I mean, maybe we want to do that. Ah, well. Invisible? No? Okay. You have to find some way to get this to, like, go away, right? And the other thing is that it's kind of annoying because if we had a plot on this screen as well, you'd have to go and do this same, you have to go and do the same thing. Well, let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's add a plot. Okay. So we've got a summary and a plot.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if this is not selected, oops, then you get this error. Okay. So, oh, if we don't want that error, then we need to check for this value. Here, we actually know it's not going to be null. It's this. Okay. Oh, that's weird that that's black. I don't think that's true if you put it into a real browser. Oh, no, it is. All right, I'll have to look into that and see why that's black.
Yeah.
um, Gosh, that really is weird.
It must have something to do with plot output.
Yeah. Okay, anyway. But the bottom line, the main thing that we're trying to correct here is that for each one of these outputs, you need to check this input data set, which is not even used here, right? It's data set input that's used. It's not like we don't directly depend on input data set, but we have to do this check. So, okay, let's go up here, and we'll say the default is null. Okay, so if you choose a data set that's not in this list, rock pressure cars, then you get null back. Okay, then at least we can say if okay, and then we get the same result. I don't know if this is making sense, but this at least we're not referring to input $ data set. You know, it's nice if we only depend on data set input that we don't have to know anything about how data set input is composed. We just know that if it's null, then we have nothing to return, or we have nothing to print. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, okay. I don't actually see the tricky part about that so far.
Yeah. So the thing that's unfortunate about this is that every time you want to use dataset input in an output, you have to put this at the top. And that's kind of unfortunate too, right? You don't want to have to think about these things. You want to just use dataset input. So our goal, I haven't talked yet about the new functionality. This is all just telling you what the state of the art is in Shiny 0.9. So we really don't like this situation. You have to put in these explicit checks everywhere you could possibly be doing a render or any kind of observer, right? If we were also writing this to disk, then you'd have to have an observer that also does this check and knows to quit. And if you don't, then you get an error, and you have an error showing up in your UI, which nobody likes this. So okay, so let me show you what the new state of affairs is. Okay. So we have a new function called validate, okay? And you can give validate multiple arguments, and at least as this functionality is pretty new, I think most of them will look something like this. So it's really two functions that we're introducing right now. There's validate and there's need, okay? So we can say we need dataset input, okay? So input dataset. So this reactive, we're saying, needs input dataset or else it cannot continue. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So we'll say need input dataset, and if you don't provide it, then we'll say please choose a dataset.
Okay.
Okay, see what happened there?
Please choose it. Yes. Why did the plot go away?
Okay, so a couple of things here. First of all, notice that this is not a red error with a bold, error in front of it. So we chose a different presentation when it's a validation error. We don't want people to think that something's gone terribly wrong. It's just that, hey, you didn't do the thing that you need to do. Okay, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is, notice that we put this inside of dataset input, inside the reactive. We didn't put it in any of the outputs. So the outputs here have not changed at all. We've got output summary just uses the dataset input, and the plot just uses dataset input. Okay, we didn't have to put in any checks here. So, so that was part of our goal here. Is that what we want to be able to do is put this call only at the place where input dataset is actually needed, and just by using it in that one place, anything that uses this reactive or whatever it is. Will work correctly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that you won't have the problem of, oh, I forgot inside of output summary to check if dataset input could be null. Or at least not for these validation reasons. You don't have to check anything. You just call dataset input. And the way this works is this call to validate will make sure that input dataset is present, and if it's not, it actually throws an exception. but it's a special kind of exception. Okay, it throws an error. It throws, I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's a class of error that Shiny knows doesn't count as like a real bold red error. It counts as a validation error, so it'll show up in this sort of subtle gray. Okay.
Okay.
So are you with me so far?
I'm a little curious about what I see, because I see a light gray please choose a data set in what appears to be a well panel, and then the actual please choose data set statement. Are both of those part of the display, or is that this display showing up in two different places?
This is 3 different controls. This is the summary, this is the plot, and this is the table. Okay.
Oh, there's not.
Okay, so this is actually, it's a little bit of a shame that it shows up in 3 places. But you know, maybe we'll kind of let you customize the UI more over time. But right now, the main thing that we're trying to get across is the data flow, like the mechanism by which we propagate these exceptions, how that works. So you know, we may do some work on the front end to give you some more control over how these are presented later.
Well, that may not be that bad, because if those were on different tab panels, for example, you'd run it.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and I think that'll be the case most of the time. Or maybe at least if this was if it was obvious, like if there was a word plot here or something like that, showing that this is about to be a plot, you know, then it would be a little more sensible. So, okay, so I guess I picked not a great example for showing this off. But you can see even this bottom thing, which I even forgot existed, this render table at the bottom uses dataset input, and it also caught the same validation error as you'd expect. So let's go ahead and choose one. Okay. And let's say that this number of observations is something that we wanted the user to provide, not for us to default it to 10. Okay. Oh, I wonder, can you give this? How does this work? Null, maybe? Okay, yeah, sure enough. Okay. Let's have it default to rock. Oops. Okay. So now we have the same problem with the value at the bottom. We're getting an error instead of getting a validation message. And the reason, again, is that, okay, it uses input obs, but, you know, at no point did we check whether input obs, you know, was valid. So, so where do we put the call to validate? Well, we put it in whatever chunk of code is going to use input obs. Okay. So here we'll say validate need input obs. Okay, so let's pause a moment here and look at what the help for validate. Okay, so validate can take multiple expressions. Right now we expect that mostly there'll be calls to need. You can put multiple ones of these in here. So you could do need input dataset in here, for example. And then need takes, for sure you need to give it an expression of what you're testing, whatever value is required. And then you can either provide an explicit message like we did the first time, or you can just provide a label, and you have to do that named. Okay, so you provide either a message or a label. You don't provide both, and you don't provide neither. Okay, provide exactly one of those two. So here I can say label equals observation, number of observations. Okay. So now if I reload that app, it says number of observations must be provided.
Okay. Will it always just append the label to must be provided?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's, you know, it's not saving you very much typing, but since I anticipate this is going to be a very, very common thing to do, is to provide need a simple expression and then what that expression is, and rather than having them type in must be provided or whatever this ends up being when we ship, you know, we give them a slight shortcut for doing that. Okay.
But they're going to have to write out label, otherwise it won't.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, yeah. I found it, you know, since this can be more than just a requirement, you could do. Well, okay, sorry. Let me come back to that in a second. So, what kinds of things then does Shiny consider to be passing this check need and what kinds of things are failing. Okay, and it may not be that intuitive. You might think that null is failure and non-null is passing, right? So like, in what cases will this validation not succeed? Okay, you might assume that it's, when input obs is null, then it'll be a failure, and when input obs is not null, then it'll be success, right? But it turns out, like, okay, look at this top one. If we change this caption, it changes this text here. What if we wanted to make sure that that had a value, right? Like, there's something very different about no text and text, right? So if I told you the value caption was required, what do you think that would mean? You'd probably think, oh, I better put something in there that's not a zero-length string, right? So zero-length string is not null, right? So input dot, what is it called? Here. Oops. So input caption. Okay. Okay, so that failed, right? Oh, it's interesting that it's still a title. Okay. Well, that's kind of a weird case anyway for an output to be a title.
Yes.
So my point is, like, so this caption, like, what is this? What is this thing that we're looking at here? Caption. Okay. When I make this empty, it's empty string. Okay. So if we want this case to work, then need needs to fail if input caption is an empty string, and it does. Okay. So this value can be null, it can be an empty string, it can be a bunch of other things, and all of those things will cause the validation to fail. And that's all documented in the help here. So these are the things that are considered not, the value has not been given. So false by itself, null, a single empty string, empty atomic vectors, vectors that contain missing values, a logical vector with all false. So that might be like a bunch of checkboxes, and none of them are checked. And then any try error. Let's come back to that in a second. And then action button, like if you've never clicked it, that counts as a failing value as well. Am I making any sense right now? Are you with me, or are you completely lost?
Complete sense. I'm trying to think of scenarios where I'd want like false or an empty string to go through, but in that case I wouldn't use validate. It's probably what's going on.
Yeah, so you could still use validate. You would just have to do the check yourself. So if you just give a bare value here, then that's what'll happen. But if you want to do, like, let's say only null is failing for you, then you can say I need input caption to not be null. Okay, so just give us a little more information about what you want, and here, so we can zero that out, and it's not a validation error anymore. Okay. So
how's that work?
Yes. So these rules apply if you give a bare value. But notice that false is always failing and true is always succeeding. So you can give just a very explicit Boolean expression here, or logical expression here, and that'll always do what you expect. Okay. I need this thing to be true, and that's fine. Okay. So it's only the cases where it's neither true nor false, but one of these weird things that you care. So you can always fall back to making some more explicit check. Okay. So let me just say that one more time in one more way. If you don't like these rules, they just don't affect you unless you literally do this. Okay. If you literally just give a value into need and say, tell me if that's a truthy or falsy value, then these rules come into play. But since we treat logicals as you'd expect, you can then, I need this to be a non-zero length character, right? And now it does what I expect. So you could say, like, I need input caption to be identical to foo. And then the message can be caption must be foo. Okay?
Huh.
You look very pensive.
No, I'm not pensive.
Okay. Okay. So basically, I mean, you could think. Maybe I should have come at this from the other direction. You can say need and then something that evaluates the true or false, here, and then a message. But as a convenience to you, if you give us something that's neither true nor false, but some other value, then we'll take a guess. And we've taken a guess based on, a lot of thought about different cases. But if we're wrong, then fine. Make your own true-false expression. Okay.
That's a good way to explain it.
Yeah. Okay. Just to really hammer it home, let's do one more example. Let's say checkbox group input. So we'll say choices. Choose exactly 2. And then let's do maybe 6 letters. Okay.
Okay.
So choose exactly 2 of these. Okay. And that's what we're going to end up printing into our summary for some weird reason. So we'll say validate. I need. I forget how checkbox works. Let's say input.
Oh, it's going to be a string that says ABC. I was just writing off checkboxes.
Sorry, say again?
So it's going to be a character vector with the values A, B, and C?
Oh, I think so. I think that's right. Okay, see that?
Yeah.
So you can validate any condition that you want, and you can return any message that you want. It doesn't just have to be this is required, this is not required. So you can insist that only prime numbers be given. You can say, hey, that doesn't look like an email address. Like whatever you want to do. You can, as long as you can make an R expression that returns true or false, then you can test that thing. Okay. Let me add another note to this. So. Let's say we also are going to check, before we get into this data set, but let's say we also care about the caption here. We'll say need the input caption to be provided. Okay. Now 2 things are out of whack as far as this code is concerned, right? We neither have chosen to, nor have we provided a caption. And you'll notice we don't just return the first one, we return all of them that are failing. Okay. So you can let the user correct them all at once rather than having to. Well, I mean, in the case of most Shiny apps, it immediately fixes itself. But imagine there was a submit button here. If it was that kind of an app, you might want the user to know all the errors rather than you fix one and it gives you a different error. Now you got to fix that and a different error. You'd give as many as possible. This isn't perfect, but it does sort of work. Okay. Okay, but here's where my examples get not so great. I don't have a great example of this, but let's imagine. Oh, okay. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's make a new one of these called email. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm just going to keep abusing this output summary guy here. So we want to validate that the email must be provided first. Okay. Email must be provided. Okay. So what if I say foo for my email? Well, that's not really an email address, right? So we want to verify that as well. So we can say what is this? grepl. Let's just do a very basic check. So it needs to be a word, character. It needs to, or it can possibly be period or dash. Oh, this doesn't need to be escaped. Some set of things followed by an at, followed by some combination of things, and then a dot, and then the end of a domain. Okay. If that works the first time, I hope you're very impressed.
I'm already impressed, yeah.
So we'll say we need this to be true. Okay. grepl. Otherwise, it's not an email address, or it doesn't appear to be possible to be an email address. Okay. So let's let that run. Oh, I have to. Okay, email must be provided. So now, message, not a valid email address. Sorry, that's right. Okay, so we're checking whether it's there, and then we're checking whether it's valid. Okay. Email must be provided, not a valid email address. Let's just make sure this works before we continue. Okay, so it does. I mean, it does some checking. Oh no, that didn't work at all. Hold on a sec. You know what, rather than me try to debug this during this, let's just say this.
Well, it knows you wrote a fake email address, Joe. That's.
Oh, that's actually my real email address.
Oh.
Okay, so pretend I was smart enough to write the regex for email, like right off the bat, and we'll have joe@joecheng.com stand in for all the emails in the world. Maybe don't put my personal email into your article.
I wouldn't.
Okay, so here's the problem. When I haven't provided any value for email address, it's pretty redundant to say both of these things, right? Email must be provided and not a valid email address. Like, that's not.
Yeah.
We want it to say one or the other one, right? But that's not what we have here. Okay, so here's where my story falls apart a little bit. Okay. So there is an operator we could use. Here, let me. Okay. So maybe we'll solve this by the time we ship, but maybe not. I just want to put this in your head regardless.
Okay.
Oh, we had some different name we were going to use for this. Then? Something like that? Okay. We were going to basically give you an operator that says you can chain these things together. Okay?
Yeah.
So rather than having them be, multiple arguments, you give them as a chain of things connected by then. And I think this should work. So if I run app, okay, email must be provided. I don't get anything else. But if I start typing, then it changes to non-valid email address. Okay. And then if it's valid, then it continues.
Okay. Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So you need this, then you need this, then whatever. And then it knows how to basically short circuit when it hits a failure. And then I can say, whatever. Okay.
Have you ever seen Dude, Where's My Car?
No.
I'm impressed. There's a scene with someone keeps going and then, and it seems like a good metaphor for this.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And then. Okay, so let's talk about one or two other things. Let me. Okay, I was going to say something. I'll come back to it. What happens if there's an error here? Okay. Let's let's see. How can I make this an error? Let's say number of observations to view. We took that and we said, make sure that, is there like a is prime or something like that? Oh, you know what, let me make sure that a number is divisible by something. So I could say input obs 3 equals 0 or something like that, okay?
Okay.
Ah, shoot. Wait a minute. Yeah, it must be provided. I thought I erased that. What? Email. Oh, I called it email. Sorry. Okay. Oh, this doesn't. I don't need to give message equals. Darn it. I thought. Okay. Well, let's just say I'm doing some check. Okay, and that check blows up. Okay. I'm bringing this up because I think both Hadley and Winston had this question. So let me. So if this blows up, what happens? Well, we treat that as a real error. Okay. So you can definitely imagine you'd have a case where it's like, if this explodes, then it's an error. If not, then it's not an error. Something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, let's make this a reactive, right? If input obs equals 3, then boom. Otherwise, well, otherwise don't boom. Okay. So here, validate need foo. Oh, hold on. So I feel like I usually have thought things through better than I have today. Oh, perfect. Well, this test actually failed. Okay, missing value where true false needed. Input obs equals 3. Okay, so this is a great example of why I think we had the right thing here. Okay, this whole reactive is broken. I coded it wrong, right? Because this input obs is NA right now, and you can't use that as an if.
Okay.
Oh, so you know what? It's, yeah, okay. So let's say 1, okay, 2, 3. Okay. Wait, what? I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting that.
The wing?
What? I was expecting boom to be red. Why?
Jeez.
Oh, this is a bug. See, this isn't red either now.
Oh.
Okay, we're not removing the gray style correctly. Ugh. Okay, I'll fix that. But you can see here that this stop boom, this is like a legit. It's an error. Okay, it's not a validation error. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what if you have something like this? Like you have a foo that may or may not blow up, and if it blows up, then you want a validation error, not a real error, to say obs must be divisible by 3. Okay. And it turns out that what you can do here is just wrap this in try.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So a try error is one of the things on that list, I guess?
That's exactly right. Yeah, yeah. And you might want to do silent equals true if you don't want it to appear in your log here. If the thing that you're testing here in need may blow up and you want to consider that blowing up to be a validation error, you have to wrap it in try, because otherwise we assume that whatever code you put in there is just going to return a normal value, and if it blows up, we assume that that's a real error that you want to go and correct. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed is that even when we're displaying obs must be divisible by 3, which is the program working as we intended to,
yeah.
in our log in the console, it's shown up as an error. We turn it off there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that might just be a bug. Yeah, we should probably have that not be an error. I mean, not be logged. Oh, I actually have no idea why it's doing that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Let me look into that. That's a good point. Yeah, we definitely don't want all these messages down here, except for real exceptions. Okay. Let me go over one more thing with you here, and this is a little bit more advanced. So need does two things, right? Or you can think of it as doing two things. It either validates true-false expressions, or it kind of takes a guess based on this, the documentation about what we consider to be falsy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that covers, I mean, in terms of power, that covers everything, right? I mean, there's nothing you couldn't test by using a true-false expression, but it just might not be that convenient. Like, let's say you very commonly would want to test that a number falls within a certain range, say, right? So you could say need, I don't even know what the easiest way to do this in R is, but, input foo greater than 5 and input foo is less than 10, right?
That's about simple as it is.
I was wondering if there's like an in range, like need in range, 5, 10, like something like that. But okay. You also need to test something like that.
Yeah.
Not is null, and you might also test as is numeric, or my point being is you can imagine this getting more complicated, right?
Yeah.
So you could make a function. You could say, let's just say in range. And then this would say, you basically copy this logic into there. You get the idea. And then you could say in range input foo 5, 10. Okay. Oh, you have to give a message. Foo is not in range. Okay, but let's say like if this is a really common thing that you want to do, maybe you want to replace the entire thing with something more like this. Right? So my point being, if you wanted to not just make a function to be passed into need, if you actually wanted to replace need, what would you do? And you can imagine this being, is email address, Right. I mean, if you type these things enough, you would care to make them, as concise as possible. So we've designed validate to take not only need, but to make it very, very straightforward for you to create these values, to create these functions. Okay. So let's do this form of in range. Okay. So we'll say input obs 5, 10. Foo is not in range. Our obs is. You know what? Let's do this. We can automatically make a message that says that includes the min and max. Okay, so we can say.
You'd use the %in operator.
Doesn't in test?
Well, I mean, if we're dealing with numbers and integers, it'd be fine.
Oh, sure. Yeah, by giving a range or something like that. Yeah. Okay. So let's add one more thing. We'll say required. Okay. So if it's not required and is null x, then return. Okay, so this, we'll come back to this in a second. Okay. Otherwise, if x is greater than or equal to min and x is less than or equal to max. Yeah, you'd also want to say whether it's inclusive or exclusive, and whatever. We'll keep it simple for right now. So if it's inside of that range, then it's also a success. Otherwise, it is failure. Okay. I like printf. Must be between.
I guess printf.
So all those %s's will be replaced with what I type here. Label, min, and max. Okay, so label must be between min and max. Okay. Okay, so this is failure. Oh, actually, I need to do this. If it's null or NA, okay. So the main point of this that I wanted to show you is that when you write one of these functions, all you have to do is success means you return nothing, null or empty, same thing. Okay. For failure, you return a string that is just a message for, what the kind of failure is. Okay. So let's try this. Okay, obs is required. I give 1. Obs must be between 5 and 10. I give 5, and it works. Okay. So 4 is too low. 11 is too high. 10 works. Okay.
So it's just a function that returns nothing if everything went well, and character string if something went wrong.
That's right. And there's one other possibility. You can also fail silently. So if you return false, then it's considered a failure, but with no message. So in this case, if it's required and not present, then it'll say nothing. Okay. And there you go. It says nothing. But if I give 1, then it gives a visible error. Okay. So those are your 3 possibilities. Either return false for silent failure, return a string for a loud failure, or return null for success.
Okay.
So we've designed these to be very, very easy to write. Okay.
There's only one other thing there is one other thing I'm curious about. You said that if you have an action button that hasn't been clicked, that will also trigger the neat statement?
Yes.
But that would just be a value of 0, right? So do zeros set it off?
No, and it's really important that zeros don't set it off. So we made a change to action button with this release where, do I even have a way to show this? Here, let me do this. Oh, no, I need to call it action button. Okay, this should work. That didn't work. It printed nothing. Oh, it's render print. That's why. It eats whatever you print. It's not helpful. Okay. We've added a special class. So it's still 0, but now it's 0 with an R class attached to it. So we specifically check for this class. so we can distinguish it between normal zeros and action button zeros.
Okay.
But that was a good question. That would not have otherwise worked if we hadn't made that change.
Oh, that makes sense then.
Yeah. Originally this was supposed to action buttons were supposed to be a big part of this. That you'd be able to have validate handle these buttons. Now I think that it'll actually almost never be the case that you'll need to use action button inside of validate need. I think we'll have to do something else. And the main reason is because I thought it'd be something like this, but it turns out that when you're waiting on an action button to be clicked, you don't want these other things to be validated. Like a user never hit go. Why are you checking their email address? So it turns out you need to make it a separate call anyway. So I don't know, the whole thing just kind of fell apart.
Is it possible, I wonder, to have an argument on the action button that is the validate message and it's sent through? And so
that'd be interesting. Yeah, sure could be. But the point is that the action button itself basically always wants to fail silently. And when it fails silently, it wants nothing else to fail silently. It just wants to be alone in its failure. So you basically always want to do this. There's almost no other correct way to validate an action button than to do it separate from everything else, and then also with no message. So if that's the case, shouldn't we just call it something else? Like, that's a terrible name, but something like that. That basically, that this has to go before everything else. And then the other thing is that even this is generally incorrect. What you want is this, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense to have the action button without the isolate in most cases, because you don't want to click to make it go, but as soon as you change any other value, it automatically updates. That's completely not what you want, right?
Yeah.
So there's almost never a right way to do action buttons except following this sort of, style. So what we really want is this is the kind of functionality that we want that we don't have today. You want to be able to say, on click, do this thing. Maybe this is a function, but maybe it's just an expression. Oh, sorry. Take that away.
Do you think, is the submit button going to stick around? So you have both options, or we go get rid of one or the other?
The submit button is nice in that it automatically halts all of the inputs, rather than checking on the output side. So it's kind of hard to imagine at this point that we'd pull it, but certainly the action button, I think, is what you need for real world. Anything more complicated than the really basic case, you want to go to action button instead. So.
Sure.
So this functionality, we've written it. We just could not agree on the names, and we've been fighting about it for about 8 months now. So there's literally there's a pull request that's open on Shiny. That's number 180 or something like that. We're up to like 480, and we still have an open pull request where it's just me and Winston arguing about names. So we keep saying, we keep saying, next release we're just going to do it. We're going to stop arguing. We're just going to do it, but it just we keep going around and around. So, but yeah, we definitely need something like this is more appropriate than trying to fit action button into validate. So, so really we could even just drop this, except that, I don't know, on the off chance that that means something, it doesn't hurt. You certainly never mean an unclicked action button to mean true, right? To mean like, oh, I did provide that value. So, so I thought it'd be fine to just leave it the way it is right now. So.
Sure. Okay, well,
Okay.
this is a good hopefully a good article.
Yeah. Oh, one more thing. One more thing. The last thing here. This reload app button seems like it should bring the viewer to the front. Okay, let's see. Number of observations must be provided, so you can see that. Let's say you wanted to customize this appearance a little bit more.
Okay.
So, as you know now how to do, right?
It's CSS.
Yep. So we'll do some CSS. I think the class here is called Shiny Output Error Validation, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try this. We'll see what happens. Okay. Yeah. So that changed. Let's say we want this one particular validate call to result in some differently styled thing, like okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can give validate an error class. Dangerous. Okay. And now we can give a style, and I think the style is yeah. Okay. So whatever that error class that you give it is, you append it to the end of shiny-output-error-, and now you have a custom CSS class that's specifically for that validation call.
Oh, cool. Was that in the help page we were just looking at?
Oh wait, that shouldn't be green. That should be red if it's dangerous. Yes, I believe that it was. I might be wrong.
So
Oh, it's not. Whoops. Okay, that's a good catch. I guess we could make the docs accurate if you think that's important. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so that way you can have like multiple ones of these validate classes, validate calls that each have sort of a different, class associated with them. That said, these validate calls, they aggregate up these needs if they're within the same validate call. But if you make separate validate calls, then it'll stop at the first set of validations to fail. So you don't have a way to mix, like, here's some red and here's some green errors that can't be done. But, we're trying to keep it simple. So.
yeah.
Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that you get that. It's important to stress in the article. I think it's important to stress the fact that you can validate inside of reactives, and then any other reactive expressions or observers or outputs will automatically kind of like inherit those validation failures. Okay.
Did you have to rewrite all the output functions to do that?
No. Reactives already know how to pass along errors. So if an error happens while executing a reactive, when you call that reactive, well, it throws an error to whoever called it. And if that caller is a reactive, well, now it just hit an error. So anyone who calls it will also throw an error. So we already had errors propagating all the way through, reactive graphs. So all this is introducing an error with a specific subclass, and then when we render errors, just making sure we check for those for that particular kind of subclass. Does that make sense?
So one thing I was wondering, and actually this is kind of just a throwback to the last article, but it looks to me like you're using Windows or Linux. Is that the case?
I'm on Linux right now. The other one was, I think the other one was Mac.
Really? Oh.
Well, I could be wrong. I don't remember.
Well, because I was looking for the cool features where we were editing the source stuff in the preview window, the RStudio preview window, and my version of RStudio did not have that. So I figured maybe that's something for a different OS.
Um, oh, are you talking about this? The oh, well, it's not showing up. But the inspector.
Yeah, although we didn't see it in the viewer tab, it was when we launched an app in an external window.
Hmm. Um,
No, in the window, not external.
Can you see my right? Oh no, you just see a black square, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. It might be that there's an option you need to turn on that I've long since turned on that enables. Yeah, I think there might be like a hidden preference basically if you want to debug the web interface.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll see if I can dig that up and I'll let you know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just thought I'd ask since we were talking.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
This looks great. Thanks for sharing this with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that's it. So I need to. There are two things I need to check, right? One was to fix the error class in the documentation to actually say what it does, and then and then once something becomes a validation error, then even real errors show up in gray, and then error in plot dot. Oh, right. The validation errors are printing out to the console, and they shouldn't. Right? That was the last thing.
That's right.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Sounds good. So are we good?
Yeah, definitely so. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Garrett. See ya.
Bye.